Okay, this is our Evolution and Creationism project by Natalie and Nate and Camila. Our question this time was, is creation viable, is a viable source, is it a viable theory that we can actually debate with? And is it according to many religions that have lasted throughout years and the flaws of evolution? We believe that creationism is viable because we actually have because evolution has so many flaws in it. There's so many missing pieces to it, and a lot of religions have a lot of consistency of different things that have happened throughout time.
We'll be discussing science versus religion. It's faith-based and evidence. Basically, creationism is on the faith-based side, while evolution is more science and evidential. Creationism mainly focuses on different religions and practices that they follow in their beliefs. However, evolution, on the other hand, is focused mainly on statistics and science.
Okay, well, first of all, we're gonna there's two types of evolution. There's microevolution and macroevolution. We're saying that macroevolution, we're saying that that's not a thing, but microevolution is the small adaptations that happen between species, but that's when the species don't change into completely new things. So we're saying that microevolution did happen because it still happens where species adapt and change, but we can't see that they completely change into something new other than macroevolution where that's suggesting that we all came up from a common ancestor or something like that. So
Christianity's take on evolution is kind of similar to what you're going to see in the next couple of slides. Christians believe that God created the world in 7 time periods, because we're really not sure if it was 7 days. Most people tend to agree on that it was 7 days, but nobody is sure because through the translation in time. They believe that it was microevolution, not macroevolution, since species have evolved, and they believe that once God cleansed the earth, when God flooded the world, because of all the sin that had been committed, animals began evolving after Noah released them from the ship. Animals started evolving just a little bit, not from giraffe to penguin. And then Sikhs believe that it is possible, microevolution is possible. There is a possibility that it might have happened, but it all comes back to the idea that it's all God's doing. So many of the older people in the Sikh community don't really care for it, but many of the newer young generations who are finding out about how to incorporate evolution into their religion, if it is true or not, they go back to this idea that God made it happen anyway. No matter what, God made it happen. And then the Islamic faith, they believe that Allah created the world in 6 periods. It's kind of debatable, the same thing with Christianity, that it might have been 6 days or 6 periods. 6 days or 6 eras of time of thousands of years. But most religions have this overlying mass cleanse of the world, and they believe that that's when microevolution began to start. And still, no matter what, God is behind that.
The next topic we'll be talking about is biotic status. Biotic status mainly covers mutations, which usually vary around the norm. They usually can't create completely new species. Hundreds of thousands of generations of bacteria are still bacteria, so they're not evolving. The bacteria did not change species, so macroevolution did not take place, so that means microevolution did take place. Biotic status is a very more science type of form of creationism. It does deal with some topics of evolution that could contradict some of the theories that it has for creationism, but at the end of the day, macroevolution did not take place, so it is not very much evolving. The design debate, it's mainly a form for which creationists and Christians are jumping on. It's a theory that focuses on a higher power of being created that created the whole earth and organisms and the planets. This is believed that organisms are put here by God, and over time the organisms evolved, but not to new species, which again is microevolution, not macro. This debate mainly focuses on that Christianity and creationists believe that evolution did take place, but not by much. Just enough for species and plants to evolve, not to a whole new other organism, but just as a same itself. The K2 boundary and evolution. K2 boundary is a point in between the Cretaceous and Tertiary period. It claims that 75% of the animals went extinct. Animals who did survive should have evolved rapidly. However, fossils show that surviving creatures look almost the same as their modern counterparts. This contradicts macroevolution in many forms and ways due to the fact that they look exactly the same as their counterparts. It is believed that microevolution did take place since there were some changes between species, but not of a visible amount.
Okay, so when my point of it, of an evolution that didn't work is that not all fossils like agree with macroevolution or the complete change in species that like people think transitioned from one to another. So there are not enough intermediate fossils between species that can prove that evolution took place like everywhere. So there are some fossils that show some, but not enough to completely prove evolution because there are so many gaps in so many different species that are usually thought of as connected. So, yeah. And so some people say that there's just a fault in the fossil record, or that these organisms weren't fossilized because of that. But from punctuated equilibrium patterns of the fossil record, they say that those gaps reflect real life history. Like there's not enough faults in the fossil record to prove that those gaps weren't being filled, and like that, stuff like that. And the evolutionary trees that we're usually shown are fill in the gaps. They're inferences about how we came to be, or like how the certain organisms are connected in like. So they're saying, our evolutionary trees where they connect different organisms for the theory of evolution. Most of those connections are inferences, not actually given to us from fossils. So, yeah. And then something that helps our creationist theory is that there was the Cambridge explosion, which was when there was like a bunch of sea animals came out of nowhere and they weren't connected to anything else prior to that time. So, people are saying that that's just unfossilized creatures, but the Cambridge explosion was huge, and both evolutionists and creationists can agree on that we have no idea where they came from. So what creationists are saying is that they came from a higher power, or that's the only way that could have happened to creationists, while people who believe in evolution are trying to connect those things, even though there are almost no connections from their previous ancestors, because there aren't any.
Creationism, it is the belief that creation has pursued throughout time, even when trying to be proven wrong. Many people have clung on to this belief. Some gaps in evolution can be fulfilled by creation or the belief that a higher existence, because evolution, they believe in like the Big Bang Theory and things like that, but those are in the same thing to creationism. Like they argue, oh, well, it's just based on faith. Well, it's kind of based on faith too, evolution. So that's why it's hard to prove or disprove, because we will never know. It's only what side you decide to take on. And we decided that creationism seems more of a viable, more reasonable state of mind to think by. And these are our work citations.
Okay. Well, I will just go. I'll go with the person that has the mic, and each of you will answer one question. How's that work?
Sure.
All right, question number 1. Describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
We were able to get more insight from each other. We were able to bring different things to the table because like, I studied one part of it, she studied another part of it, he studied another part of it, so we collaborated and we got not only more to put on the PowerPoint, but more knowledge and background as to what we're actually talking about and we can use in future references for other presentations.
Cool. Who's next? Having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
A gap in our research, well, it'd basically be, it's a lot more evidential points to creationism, to evolution, I'm sorry. If there were more evidential points that we could do for evolution that we could also counteract and put more slides on our creationism project, I feel like it'd be a lot more effective and efficient. And if we were to study, I guess, evolution a lot more, I feel like we'd have more to talk about while I guess we're contradicting it.
Okay. Next. What was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion your team identified, and why?
Counter-argument to.
Either this, yep, counter-argument to the conclusion your team arrived at.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Well, what's the strongest counter-argument to what it is you're arguing?
Oh, the strongest counter-argument is that, well, pretty much how they were connected or how people, the common ancestors that people usually say came from evolution. Since there are common ancestors, it's, if you look at it from a side of evolution, it's really hard to argue against that because if you look at that from a non-religious standpoint, it's kind of, or it's more, it is still faith-based, but it feels a little laid out if you don't have that, some kind of faith or like that.
Mm-hmm.